Welcome to this second lecture on my new book, Understanding the Recent Discovery of Noah's Ark. In this series, we're calling Noah's Ark in Scripture Science. Now, in this lecture, I'm going to get to the very thing that interests many of you, which is the Ark itself that I visited. And I'm going to be talking about 10 good reasons why it's this these remains that I visit are very likely the remains of Noah's Ark. But before I do, I just want to make some preliminary observations about discovering truth. Um, First, I use very likely rather than proven because no historical event, no matter that, can ever be absolutely proven. In fact, the only thing that can be absolutely proven are tautologies, say like A is A, things that are true by definition, but they tell us nothing about what actually does exist. For that, we have to rely on evidence, and the evidence of historical truth comes either from testimony of human testimony and believers, divine testimony, uh, but also from circumstantial evidence, things like archaeology or perhaps geology or both. But fortunately, in the case of Noah's Ark and flood, it generated much testimony. Not only the account in the Bible, but the accounts by almost all the historical ancient nations had some account of the Noah's Ark and flood, or didn't necessarily call it the Ark of the Flood, but had many similarities with the account in the Bible. And that has impressed secular uh, academic scientists more than anything else about the Noah's flood. Uh, uh, and but something that really affected the whole Earth and the populations of the Earth should also generate much circumstantial evidence. And I'm going to show, it did generate much circumstantial evidence. And also the evidence for the ark, and this is where my work is very important, actually should closely match the evidence for the flood. And as I'm going to show you, they actually do. Now, the Noah's Ark and flood was a great miracle, and you've probably heard the someone talk about miracles. They say, well, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. This goes back to the Scottish philosopher David Hume. And he was the famous skeptic against everything in the Bible because they were, at that time, but and then this his claim has been carried forward by people like the late Carl Sagan, and atheists and skeptics continually use this claim. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. But we're going to meet David Hume's challenge and say, yeah, this was an extraordinary event, and it produced extraordinary evidence that testifies to it. Now, my methodology for discovering the truth is not trying to find things that verify the truth, but I use the late Karl Popper, the philosopher of science. He says that so far as a scientific statement speaks about reliability, it must be falsifiable to be scientific. So he, but well, here's what: while we can't absolutely prove any historical fact, we can disprove historical claims. So we can search for things, predictions from based on our claims or based on the account of Noah's Ark, things that might falsify the claim, and from the testimony or for the account of the Bible, we can develop criteria for circumstantial evidence, and I went even further to look for criteria that might falsify the truth of the particular claim, including the structure that I visited on Mount Ararat, where the ways to disprove that as being Noah's Ark. But if we can't do that, if it's not falsified, we should judge the truth based on what best explains the evidence. even if a miracle best explains the evidence, that's the reason for accepting a miracle. A couple more things about truth. We find truth or falsehood when we start looking at the details. And I want to be pointing out some details, unexpected details, which brings us to believe that this is Noah's Ark. And of course, we discover truth when we ask difficult questions and conduct tests. And that's been my methodology. Uh, but there's something about truth. Truth never changes. When you have a narrative and it doesn't fit and keeps expanding, the scientific narrative keeps changing because there are things that don't make sense. And so uh, in fact, when someone's not telling the truth, and I'm not saying that scientists are deliberately trying not telling the truth. Most are trying to tell the truth, but they're trying to find reasons, and they come up with it. And that's why the current account of the ancient man and the ancient world is very complicated. But in the case of truth, there is simplicity. I'm going to use the 10 reasons, beginning with what the late Dr. Norm Geisler gave for believing this was a biblical account of Noah's Ark, and expand on that. Now, Dr. Geisler was one of the pioneers of apologetics, and he had encountered many other claims for for the ark, but he never endorsed any. He never put. He may have mentioned them, but he did not put his name and scholarship with that, as he did this one, which he actually thoroughly investigated. In fact, he told Richard Land, who was president of the Southern Evangelical Seminary at the time, he said, "Richard, I have spoken to 6 people who have been inside Noah's Ark." Now, the first reason is that it was found at just the right place. And I talked about it in the last first lecture how it's not only does the Bible require this to have rested in the mountains of Ararat, but because the surrounding mountaintops were covered when the ark came to rest, it had to be at the highest place on Mount Ararat. Now, it's very interesting that this is the earliest geographical place mentioned in the Bible that can be definitely identified. So it's a relatively small place in the earth where the ark had to land for the Bible account to be the case, and that's exactly where this was found. And of course, reports of the ark actually rested on the mountain in Ararat, which we can pretty well understand was actually Mount Ararat, date from before the time of Jesus. The second reason is that the dating is right. It's the right date. The first timber that was sent to the radiocarbon laboratory dated about 4,800 years ago. And when you realize that trees had to grow for some time, that really is putting it to the time of the flood. But some of the pieces of wood that were sent dated the later time, but there's all types of problems that we have in radiocarbon dating. Even though it can be reliable, it very often is not because of the many problems. But so I'm looking for something better than dating, and one is this black basalt bowls, which I think were used for watering the animals that is on the ark. These stopped appearing with the early Bronze Age, which was the period that was actually ended by the flood, and also how they worked these hard stones, like they built the pyramids and things. Somehow that knowledge was lost with the flood. But the ark was built before the flood, so we find these on board the ark. And not only that, we find some ceramics that belonged to migrations shortly after the flood. So this is dating this about these rim handled containers. You could strap these to animals. So when they were migrating, Noah's family were migrating after the flood, they were ideal for that. And we find that in these migrations. But most exciting, one of the pieces of pottery in the ark contains this tree of life motif, which appears in the ancient Sumerian and Akkadian sites just after the flood. And of course, the tree of life, there's the account of the Garden of Eden that's being passed down through Noah's family. And even one of the accounts of the flood, the famous Gilgamesh account, he's really interested in going to finding the survivor of the flood and finding out about this tree of life. So this really does this structure is really dating to the right time, and of course it's the right conditions, which it had to be some way to preserve it. You see our friend Panda Lee standing in it, this is under the glacier. It's permanently frozen conditions which can preserve things. For example, there was back in the 90s, there was a man, some tourists found in the Alps, and he dates to about 5,000 years ago. It's really at the same time he died in the flood, obviously. But his not only is his clothes preserved, his actually flesh was preserved. And in fact, if you want to look him up, it's Otzi the Iceman. Um, and then there are also these things like woolly mammoth, the animals that were quickly frozen in Siberian. In fact, the flesh is even preserved that wolves can eat these things. But this that's evidence for the flood. These frozen animals had to happen quickly, and yet it's still to this day. But the frozen conditions of this structure is explains why this could be the Ark of Noah. Now, the fourth reason is the fact that it's impossible to build this ship near the top of a 17,000-foot mountain. The glacier it's been on that. It prevents anything from construction. Even if you clear it out, these frequent snows would have made it impossible. And if it was built on the mountain, there should be roads up there, and we should find construction materials. But nothing like this has been found. But the big reason that we know that this is ancient is it's now found at 3 separate sites in a wrecked state. It's kind of like a jigsaw puzzle that you find the parts of it, and you got to put these together. You wouldn't construct a wreckage like that, especially a wreck. That makes no sense for doing that. The only way you could have created this was to build it and then push it off the mountain where it wrecked, and that happened in the earthquake. But that makes it impossible that this could have been actually fabricated in historical times. And there's no historical record of it, such an expensive undertaking as to have built a ship on the mountain. And even if some that I have heard that the Byzantines maybe have built it as a pilgrimage site, but when they did this, they would love to crow about all their exploits of kings. But there's absolutely no reports of a historical record of such an undertaking, and it would have required them to have known what kind of artifacts were used before, so they would need this expert archaeological knowledge to do that. So it really doesn't make sense that this could have actually been built on the mountain. Now, here are 2 photographs that I took when I visited there, when I was staying there November the 9th, 2014. And I was, I was heard that the Ark was a rectangular vessel, but a rectangular vessel would not have been so stable. The bow in ships is what rights them when they're rocking in the water. But this has a slight bow that shows it to have been a ship and not some regular structure. And not only a ship, it actually has this blackened Hoyle, the internal timbers, as you can see, are or don't have this black substance on them. And the reason for the black substance is the account in the Bible shows that the ark was make the ark of cypress, coat it with pitch inside and out. Now it wouldn't have made sense to pitch the internal timbers; that would have gotten on into the fur and the feathers of the animals. But it would, but that was what you needed to keep the hull in case little cracks to pitch the hull inside and out. So this is one of those details that we really didn't expect, but this is pointing to the truth about this being the ark. The other is the fact that it looks like a place for animals. This site really looks like Noah's Ark. All these other claims, it requires a lot of imagination and a lot of stories, but it doesn't take a lot of imagination to see that this was the ark. In fact, a lot of the rooms have these buildings that you see in the upper left-hand corner with 7 pegs. And you just, why 7 pegs? Well, if you ever, the account actually talks about the clean animals, 7 of each kind of clean animals, such as cattle and sheep and goats, and horses. So they would be ideal for tying them up to water them in one of those bowls that I showed you, or for other reasons. It's one of those details that's matching this to the account of Noah's Ark in the Bible that we did not expect. And then we discovered, as some of you may remember from the original announcement in 2010, these little white pellets. We didn't know what they are, but we've had paleontologists to check these out, and it turns out they're chickpeas, but not the kind that grows in modern times, but from the Neolithic period, the time of the flood. And the interesting thing about these chickpeas is they're full of proteins, and not only can humans live on these, but so can animals. Now a lot of the skeptics of the account of the ark, they talk about, well, the animals need all these specialized diets, and they did develop these specialized diets when they went to the geographical places that had these special things, and that the animals adapted to those. But when you're hungry, you can eat almost anything, and actually, this is a very nutritious thing for almost any animals. Now, there may have been other kinds of food on board, but I'm just mentioning this. This would be a great general type of food for almost all the animals. Also, that's in the upper right-hand corner, you see what looks like a basket of nutritious cane. So these are the types of things, very general things that most animals can eat. So and then to use one of Dr. Geisler's reasons, he said this passes the smell test. Now, what I mean there, you see my friend parachute with a mask. The reason he's wearing a mask is the first time he went inside the structure, the explorers did, they opened the door and they were overcome with some kind of really, really strong smell. In fact, they had to go to the hospital. So that's why they started wearing these masks when they started exploring now. But so it turns out that not only can the permanently frozen conditions preserve food, it can also preserve animal waste. So this passes the smell test. Now, finally, I want to mention the specific reason that I can, no matter how much this looks like Noah's Ark, dates to the right times, smells like Noah's Ark, this one reason, if something can be proven, it's the fact that the Earth's population, this is my word, actually spreads from this mountain, and actually spreads from this very vessel. There are some of the pottery of what's called Kirakirak or Kuraraxis. It's a family of ceramics that was made in an open fire, which gives some of the ceramics their red coloring, and then they were burnished. But it would be ideal for a migrating family. They're migrating with the tents after the flood. And in fact, there's references to this in the scripture, and and this was the type of pottery that they could make, and the fact that this pottery is shown to be both uh, locally made and imported shows it to be from a migrations. And another thing is these animal figurines that are found in the spread that happens during this time, which I believe are Noah's flood. Now, why these animal figurines? Uh, my theory is that Noah's family are telling the grandchildren or what they found when they were on board of the ark, all these animals that were no longer around there, and the kids would be excited about it. It's possibly that they would visit the ark in a few years after, and they left one of these figurines aboard the ark. So it's this a spread which in my 2011 book I showed. I actually was able to show all the historical nations. You see the map in the upper right hand corner actually have their origin in this spread, and that actually is the closest thing that you can have for proof that this is the Noah's Ark. Now, with such great reasons for believing this, the question comes up: why? Why is everybody talking about this? Why is it being neglected? Well, I mentioned one reason. It's the fact that there's no new announcement since Norman and I were on Fox News back in 2015, um, and and until this book that I've just written, which is really has the strongest, most information and the strongest claim about this art. This and the second reason, of course, is that almost what keeps us blind to what happened is not what we don't know, but what we do know or think we know about the ancient world or even about the flood that just happens not to be true. The meme there is from the movie A Few Good Men. One of them asked, "I want the truth," and he said, "You can't handle the truth." Now, this conflicts with everything, not just what science has taught about the ancient world, but also what we evangelicals have been teaching about the ancient world. Whether those old Earth creationists who teach a local flood, or the young Earth creationists who have misunderstood the evidence of the flood, which, as my book shows, is actually the Ice Age. And and then for that reason, there hasn't been a supporting American and Western organization. And I'm not an organizational person. The people that know me, my freedom, my independence is so important. I'm not good for organization, but I'm much willing to work with whatever organizations would like to to platform this discovery or me. And one of the reasons, though, that people are very reluctant to do this, and I understand this reason, I think it's a very good reason, the fear of something is just too good to be true, something that could really just turn the tables on science, between science and the Bible, and not only embarrass science, and that's one thing that a position cannot handle the ridicule that would come from this, but but also would be marvelous for faith. So that's reasons that you need to. Someone probably want to learn a lot about, so your confidence builds up, and you can see that this is very real. And so I thank you very much for. By the way, one of the things that makes this discovery so unique is that there's not an organization behind it or one individuals, but people from Asia and Europe and the United States. Of course, me here in the United States, and we're brought together by the same. And there are some people that are very excited about it, but this is a hidden gem for whoever wants to become involved in this world changing discovery. So um, I this will these are this is something that deserves the attention of the world, especially from believers. Thank you very much.